All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Recap Podcast. My name is Steve. I'm here with Pastor CJ Johnson. I know.
We need like a soundtrack.
Oh, my gosh. This would be a great weekend for an ESPN soundtrack. There was a lot going on. The World Series. Did you watch the World Series?
I caught glimpses, highlights, and the final few innings.
Yeah. Are you a baseball fan? I am not a baseball fan. I don't get it. I think it's probably, except for probably the World Series, one of the most boring sports that I've ever seen.
Okay, so I love baseball. Growing up, man, there wasn't a team or a player I didn't know. I was just obsessed. I don't know if times have just shifted where there's not margin in my life to sit down and watch a baseball game. I do think it's good nap television, similar to maybe watching golf.
Yes.
So I don't find myself watching that. However, I will say a ballpark experience still for me is set apart. Yeah. I love going to the games with the family, and it's kind of like, and still kind of background noise. Yeah. You can sit there, have conversations, enjoy the ballpark food, but love baseball. Played it all the way, growing up.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my biggest tensions with my dad was he thought I was a better baseball player than basketball player. And that offended me for some reason. And so I quit baseball to focus on basketball, which he didn't like at first. But, I do like baseball. And, I mean, this was an instant classic.
Yeah,
absolutely. Went, 7 games, broke a lot of different records, had a lot of different unique things, had an 18-inning game in it.
Which, man, that's crazy. Yeah, when I was a kid, I played baseball. They called me the Wild Thing. I was a pitcher, and I just hit so many batters that they were just like, "No, you probably should go to the outfield." So I woke up and I chose violence this morning. I'm going to give you something that's going to make somebody hate you.
Okay. Perfect.
Of the 3 major sports, the 3 major American sports.
Okay.
We got baseball, we got basketball, we got football.
Yep.
What championship is more interesting? Like, what do you, like, if you were to look at all the championships and you're just like, man, watching that is an iconic event, which one of those championships is more interesting? I got him. This is a hard one. And so, and then there's the people that are be like, well, obviously soccer. MLS.
Yeah. Well, I would say baseball has the most opportunity for something rare to happen. I'm sorry, not baseball, football.
Okay.
In the sense that it's one game.
Yeah.
So baseball and basketball, you're playing 7-game series. And so that, for the most part, flushes out the best team.
Right, yeah.
Any team can beat a team once. To beat a team 4 times really establishes which team is superior. Well, in football, it's one game.
Right.
And
you could have a bad game and just lose it very easily.
And I think I'm a Packer fan, and the times that we were the wild card coming in, barely making the playoffs, and then we made a run to the Super Bowl. And it's, again, because you just have to get hot at the right time. And so I do think that makes football more interesting in the sense of it's one and done, and it's not always the best team winning. It's sometimes who showed up and things went the right way. They had the best game plan, and so I think that keeps it a little more interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes you have that like Cinderella story of a player who just pops off at the right time. Over a series, maybe they wouldn't have shone so much, but like in that moment, they have their, the Rudy moment.
Yeah.
Just like that one guy, you wouldn't expect that he's going to do it, but that was their opportunity.
Yeah, and the football scenario, it's still a quarterback's league.
Yeah.
And so if a quarterback gets hot, all bets are off. You never know what could happen, and you see that all the time.
Yeah. What's the parallel in the church of just those Super Bowl moments, those moments where you're just like, that was iconic? What have been those experiences in your past?
Well, in terms of there being pressure one and done, I think of just some of the big weekends like Christmas and Easter where you can be a decent Bible teacher, but come into that weekend and just lay an egg. And that's frustrating. It's like, I can look back on times where I just didn't think my Christmas message was that good or my Easter message was that good. And sometimes it's the additional programming and the things that you try to do creatively that maybe complicate it a little bit, and then you walk away like, oh man, I think my worst message the entire year was probably on the biggest weekend. So I think of that probably when you asked that question.
Yeah, this weekend. We had I think one of those moments where obviously it wasn't a Super Bowl weekend, but just kind of like a really precious time during worship. We sang the song called "Nobody," which I absolutely love. It was funny in our huddle before service. I was like telling the team, "Man, I just love nobody," and everybody started laughing. And I said it completely innocently. I was not even thinking of like, I just love nobody. And everyone was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, the song "Nobody," just iconic. But then at the end of that, we did a rendition of "Because He Lives," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Simone sang that at the Carmel campus.
Man.
And that was a moment. Like, what made that really special for you as we just sang something that is a hymn? It's old school.
Yeah. Well, for one, I approve a list of songs, that the team will send me maybe quarterly, like, hey, here's some songs that we think we'd like to put in cycle or rotation here at the church. So I think I know the bank of songs that the team's pulling from, but I never know the actual song set coming into the week. And I purposely try not to, because I like being in the experience with the congregation. And so I always find that is just kind of cool for me as well. In addition to that, I love to see how the Lord works through it, where you can always show up on the weekend knowing that the team is covering this in prayer, because there's decisions that were made from a musical side of things that completely support and align with the message. So I would say that in terms of hymns, I basically give free reign to the team. Like, hey, you if it's a hymn, feel free to introduce it or incorporate it. For me, I've said this before, I learned most of my theology through hymns. Mm-hmm. And I think people probably misinterpret that statement. It's not to say I wasn't reading the Bible, during my early stages of faith, or in any way discrediting Scripture. It's simply to say songs get stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And it's that language that sometimes, just gets played on loop in your mind that gives you the ability to articulate and say things that align accurately with Scripture in terms of expressing your faith and theology. And Because He Lives is one of them. I think when you consider the resurrection, it is so much more of just a wait and see type of doctrine and theology. It's not like, oh, at some point I'm going to die, and at that point I will experience whether or not there's resurrection beyond the grave. No, it's something that infuses itself into the here and now. And that's what that song captures. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. That you do really start to live informed by the idea that death is not the end. It has lost its sting. And Christ dealt with our greatest predicament. And so you start to move forward facing whatever comes your way with a different confidence. And so that song gets me. There are certain songs that's kind of like they say smell is the number one sense tied to memory. Yeah. And how you can have a certain smell that will transport you back to your grandma's house and her cooking or whatever. I do think a lot in terms of music can do the same. And I hear some of those songs and I can remember like auditoriums and pews I sat in. And when I was in college, I gave my life to Christ, 19 years of age, and I started attending this small church called Glad Tidings Assembly of God. And bro, I would sit in the back. They did all hymns, a lot of really just a cappella stripped down hymns. There was an old usher who never really got into my bubble, but he always just kind of sat in the pew near me. And I don't know if he was serving as a buffer to like kind of just, hey, let this guy like figure it out. But I can remember sitting in very isolated places in that back row in those pews and getting rocked by some of those songs. So it definitely had me in my feels.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was growing up, just kind of similar experience, small church. We were Church of Christ. I didn't know at the time that Church of Christ were supposed to be like non-instrumental. So we had a piano, we had the organ and
Breaking
everything
all
like
the
that.
rules.
Yeah. But I just always remember, because some of those hymns, like, if you haven't been in like hymn, culture or whatever, some of them have like 6 stanzas.
Yeah.
And they're like theologically deep. They are long. And we were always like, all right, go in your hymnal to the first, the third, and the fifth.
That's right.
And we would like sing those. And I'm like, I wonder why they chose those that weekend. Like, why are we singing? What about the second and the sixth?
Yep.
But yeah, you could sing one of those songs for a while. But I think the interesting thing about hymns and kind of what you're talking about, like informing your theology, is that when those were created, a lot of people were illiterate. And so that was a way of infusing theology into the community at large. It's like you sing those songs, like you're going to remember them.
Yeah. Well, and when you start to think about just some of the changes that we've seen in the church, it's kind of comical. I grew up in the same church where you pull out the hymn book, literally the worship pastor says the verses you're going to sing, and nowadays that would be viewed as just clunky or disruptive to the worship experience. If you don't transition from song 2 to song 3 with a worship pastor who knows how to really just lead that moment smoothly. No, back then it just wasn't
You're
so
flipping
pretentious.
Flipping through trying
It's
to find the
here
page.
it is. And I remember everyone holding a book. This is pre-projector days, and maybe you had a slide projector.
Yes.
At one point, I got to serve as a volunteer in that role.
Oh, nice.
Which was
A lot of pressure there.
Well, yeah, because one, the number of times I put the slide on the projector, which most people maybe listen to this, especially if you're under the age of 30, maybe you don't even know what I'm talking about. But there was the big lamplight projector that, as a volunteer, you would show up to the church, and the worship leader, if they hadn't already pulled the slides, they would give you the set, and they'd say, all right, we're doing these songs. And you would pull the verses, similar to what you just mentioned in terms of going through the hymn book. And so you would pull the laminate slides, and then you would put them on top of the glass during the worship set. Well, 2 things would always happen. I would either put it upside down or backwards.
Right.
So that would happen. And then in addition to that, I was so nervous my hands would sweat. And dude, there would be like smudged thumbprints like on the screen while I would do it. And I remember actually at one point someone give me feedback on like, hey, you should just have maybe a towel to wipe your hand off because you're getting thumbprints on things.
That's awesome.
The stuff we worry about, I guess. But yeah, I just think it's a precious history. The tension that you have with that is I'm a hymn enthusiast, and people know that about me. And I will get people who will ask, well, hey, if you love the hymn so much, why don't you force the team to sing more?
Sure.
And I think that's a tension that is always going to be the case. I think you always have to pay honor to the past and where we're from. And I think there's a place to always infuse those things that come with a timeless, sacred substance that in many ways stirs the embers of our faith in the congregation. But Scripture does say that God places within the hearts of each generation a new song and a proclamation. And I think in the same way, the artists of those previous generations were gifted and called and appointed for a time to leverage their gifts to translate the gospel in different mediums to their culture and communities. I think we need to always carry that precedent forward, that we allow the next generation to do the same thing. And music will probably always be the ongoing debate in churches. I'm proud of our team. I think they do an amazing job of providing a multi-generational and I would say even multicultural worship experience. And that's hard, and I don't think they're forcing it. I think it's a natural expression of who they are.
Yeah, I ran into somebody in the lobby this weekend who was like, what was that second song this weekend? And I was like, second song. I looked it up on our play sheet, and it's a What Kind of Love, which is a Northview original. Yeah. And he was like, that was me. He's like, I heard that song, and that was me. And he was an excuse me, he was an older gentleman. And it's just so cool to see something that our worship team's creating that is resonating with the people in the church.
Yeah, you say that. When we were on our turkey trip, while we were driving from location to location, it became open mic on the buses, which was great. People were sharing testimonies. And one of the ladies on our bus got up and shared a testimony of this really cool moment. I don't want to over-divulge someone else's story, but a moment that she had specifically tied to the lyrics, again, of that song.
Yeah.
And so shout out to the team, how God is using some of that stuff, and the plans for that moving forward is going to be great.
Yeah, you have a pretty extensive Spotify playlist of like worship and stuff. You're always listening to stuff. Music is kind of like one of your like love languages when it comes to your spirituality. Are there any other songs right now like that you've heard out there in culture that maybe speak to you in a way that some of the hymns did, or maybe have some theology that you're just like, man, that just hits me where I need to be hit?
Yeah, it's funny. So at the end of the year, Spotify, apparently they track the data of their listeners. And I got some award that said you are in the top 1% of music listeners on Spotify. So in our household, bro, music is always playing.
Yeah.
Every car ride, it's just always on. And we listen to a lot of worship music. And so I was top 1% for Spotify, and then they said there's something else about being in the top when it came to a genre of music, and it was worship. Yeah. But I have this. It's funny. I'll pull it out and see if I can find this real quick. I have this playlist on Spotify. People have asked about it, and I think right now some people have started subscribing to it. But it's I called it Pastor CJ's playlist, and I go through it, and now it's up to like 100 and maybe 20 songs on this playlist. But I can almost tell the seasons I was in.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, watch, I'll just read through this and just give you the titles, and you can almost sense kind of where I've been at spiritually.
Yeah.
I Say Yes, Son of Suffering, How Good Is He, Mercy, Come Again, Not Done Yet, Faithful Now, Never Leave, Now Here, Love Changes Everything, You Keep Hope Alive, War Cry, Just the Cross, Doubt, Grace Like Waters, Deliverer, We Say Yes, He Has Time, Abundantly More, Believe for It, Jesus Over Everything, Firm Foundation, Never Lost, The Good Thief, Lion, Tin Roof, Little Bird, Brighter Days. Those are all three blessing offer songs.
Yeah.
He's the guy. But you kind of go through it. Fear Is Not My Future, House of Miracles, Never Walk Alone, Every Victory, Christ Our King, Always Only Jesus, Ask, Seek, Pray, I Speak Jesus, Fresh Wind, What a Beautiful Name, Where Would I Be, My God Still Is the Same. And though it's funny because I was looking at that the other day, and it definitely kind of probably shows a thread. Yeah. Because I'm a big anthem guy, so the worship team will tell you I tend to like it when a song gets there fast. Yeah. Not in terms of tempo, but I get us to the chorus, get us to the bridge. Yeah. Some people like the slow build of verse after verse. I'm like, man, get it to the part where the whole room is just shouting out some proclamation. But I do like the anthems.
Man, that's amazing. After that Because He Lives moment, you kind of went off script for your message.
I know. It's always a risk.
And but in a really great way. I mean, just leaning into the uniqueness of the gospel. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what really tied those two moments together?
Yeah, anytime the team has me come out of worship, which is my preferred function, like if I can...
Yeah, we get worried.
I know.
We get worried. We're just like, oh, we're going to be here for a while.
Yeah, because it almost triggers an additional 10 minutes worth of thought.
Yeah.
And so it is a bit of a gamble. But I just feel it comes with more of an outflowing expression of what is happening in the room, and it creates a continuity between worship and the message. One, that song resonates deeply with me, but two, it definitely, I think, brought me back to my ministry in Minneapolis. And there I was just doing a lot more contending for the faith than I do here. One way to maybe think about it is, it's not that I'm not contending for the faith here, but in terms of, if you think of the prodigal son story, the parable of the prodigal, which is actually the prodigal God and father that's like really the true spendthrift in that situation. But the younger brother, he takes off with his inheritance. He wastes it all. He spoils it. He hits rock bottom. There's a clear turning point in his life where he discovers what I'm doing is not working. I need to turn back to my father.
Yeah.
And he comes back. The father meets him along the road, which really great principle there, even probably for parents raising, especially adult children who are making some of their own decisions. When the son takes off, the father doesn't chase him. You know, when the son turns, the father is standing ready to go out and meet him. And one of the hard things I think parents have to do, and this is something I think my parents did with me when I went through a really rebellious stage, is they allowed me to discover what Scripture says, that the wages of sin is death. And you start to realize, hey, the decisions I'm making, they're eroding so many things in my life, and they're killing my hopes, my dreams, my potential, my relationships. And you almost have to allow those individuals to have that discovery for themselves. You get the son, he turns, and the father goes out to the son, and he throws his robe on him. He gives us his ring. It's this really symbolic moment that we could probably spend the next hour discussing. Yeah. And he throws a party, kills the fattened calf. Hey, everybody come in. Well, the party begins, and the older brother is standing outside the party, and he's frustrated. And he's partly frustrated because he's aware of his inheritance and the fact that this was split in two, and he went and wasted his, so anything being spent now is coming out of mine. Yeah. You know, which is a hint at Christ, our older brother, who shares his inheritance with us. But what he doesn't realize, and the father goes out and invites him to come into the party, and the parable leaves us on the cliffhanger. You don't know, like, is he going to enter the party or not? But the takeaway there is both sons are lost. They're both lost. They're coming to that realization in very different ways. And I would say that I come out of a culture in Minneapolis where I was mainly ministering to younger brothers who were proud of the life they were living, heading in a very specific direction. Hey, I'm turning my back on this. I don't want anything to do with it. Proud not to be a Christian. Proud to disagree with you. Proud of whatever lifestyle or view that they have. Indianapolis has more older brothers. I did not expect the shift from one Midwest city to the next being, hey, I was in Chicago, I was in Minneapolis. I think I assumed Indianapolis would be similar. And that's not to say it's worse. It's just to say it's different. And in some ways, it's better. But we're very much on the edge of the Bible Belt. Yeah. And so here you have you can drive through our community chucking a rock and just see amazing churches. And in fact, when we showed up here, and our kids would notice God Bless America on our license plates. Right, and the church buildings out here are massive. Yeah. And I remember one day one of our kids said in the car, like, hey, is everyone out here a Christian? You know, because that just wasn't our situation in Minneapolis. Well, here, because there's such a culture for the faith, people have the language of the faith without the life to match it. Wow. And so I find myself here in conversations with people who they're convinced, oh, I'm a Christian. And I'm thinking, you're the older brother standing outside the tent, truly not entering the party. Yeah. And so that long explanation, bit of a rant, I think the song brought me back to all the times in Minneapolis where I sat across the table from a Muslim in our community, and that was just a much more constant thing for us. And a very frequent conversation that I was having there that I really don't really find myself having out here. And so I think it kind of brought me back into that headspace a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's probably a good place to go next is just, so you kind of mentioned just that difference between Christ and Muhammad, the difference between Christianity and Islam. And one of my questions just coming out of that is because even in Romans right there, we were seeing just that difference between the Jews and the Gentiles, and that separation that came up. Now, obviously, that's a different time, but there's some very big similarities in that separation. But the question that came to my mind is, how do you contend and fight against an ideology while not demonizing the people? There's definitely in our culture, there's a lot of that, not only between Christianity and Islam, but Christians and Christians, Democrats and Republicans, but specifically in that discussion, because you can very much set us up, us versus them.
Yeah.
Their whatever they're believing is, and not even what they're believing, they are the enemy versus us as the hero of the story.
Yeah.
How do you walk into that?
Yeah, I think we fear people we don't understand and things we don't know. And so I think a lot of times of our attack is rooted in uncertainty, the fact that we don't have proper information to navigate any type of productive dialogue. And so, it's that statement, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Right.
And so when you don't know, hey, what does this person believe and where are they coming from, you kind of just clobber them a little bit.
Yeah.
And I do think we're always better when we try to sit in conversations, get to know people, get to know their experiences, listen to where they're coming from. I would say if you're a new believer, you can't do that immediately in terms of contending for the faith. Maybe one way to think about it in terms of sports, which shout out to the Northview Athletics, which was launching this week, is when a kid starts to shoot the basketball, and I would harp on my kids about this, you show up to a gym and Stephen Curry made every kid want to shoot three-pointers. And so every kid goes out there and they're just chucking up shots from distance and they have terrible form and they're throwing up all these bricks. And I would force my kids to stand right in the middle of the lane and just shoot close shots. And I kept telling them, hey, you can't take a step back if you can't shoot it perfect. You have to be able to maintain the proper form in order to shoot at further distance. And I do think there's a similarity to that in the faith, where when you first come into the faith, you do got to get your feet underneath you. You do got to develop some personal disciplines and really tend to your own personal discipleship and focus on your own spiritual formation before you overextend yourself and run out there and start functioning outside your range as a believer. But once you're in it long enough, you do have to start to responsibly think through, how am I going to reach the people in my life? And how am I going to reach the people who disagree with me and the people in proximity? And you're not going to be able to do so if you cannot reason well with them. Yeah. And so like I said, for me, I think I became really familiar with, Islamic beliefs just because I was surrounded by them, and so you kind of find yourself in conversations, and there's always so many things that as I would do my own study that I would bump into and be like, oh, I had no idea that's what they believed. And when you start to discover what they believe, you actually start to identify opportunities for you to share your faith in a respectful and convincing, yet not forceful way, where it's like, oh, so you guys actually believe that the Bible is a sacred text. You guys believe in Adam and Eve and the fall. You guys believe in Jesus and the virgin birth and all of his miracles. Okay, so there's a a common ground that you guys hold on to that, well, I can launch off of that. Like, you know, and so that makes the conversations easier, I think. Again, you got to pray through what the Lord is calling you to and what you're actually committed to walking out. Don't be the person who's like, oh, today I'm going to be an apologist who defends Christianity against Islam. And so you fire out some Facebook post and then you leave it at that. And like, no, you make sure you do your study, make sure you commit to the relationships you're connected to. But we attack things we don't understand and people we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you're saying there, just those conversations are almost never handled best on Facebook or social media or something like that. But the commitment to the relationship, you're like, well, if you're going to commit to a relationship, you're actually committing to time. You're committing to care in a lot of ways. Is like, do you actually care for that person that you're debating, or do you just want to be right?
Yeah, I mean, when 2020 took place and there's everything in the world happening, there immediately became this precedence that every leader, person on a platform, and this was certainly true of pastors, was suddenly expected to make a public statement on social media about every social happening in the world. And that was exhausting, you know, because the thing about social media, and if you think about Instagram, it's the idea is rooted in it being instant. And now it doesn't even have to be accurate. It just has to be immediate.
Yeah.
And that's a pressure that almost always pushes you into foolishness. If what you're doing is trying to be the first to say something and quick to say something and to do it in a window of time that everyone expects, oh, we need a statement on this. Well, you're going to misfire because, like we've discovered with so many things, information takes a while to make its way out, and it takes time to pray and discern about certain things. And I, at one point, had to tell our congregation in Minnesota during that season, I said, look, you're going to be very disappointed by my social media because I really just don't care to shoulder my leadership influence through that mechanism primarily. And I made some statement about if you want to understand who I am, what I care about, my beliefs, my values, the way I function, don't look at my social media network. Look at my immediate social network. Look at a person's life. You know, that's the thing. There's such I think, a gap for a lot of people where you can look at some person's social media platform and think, oh, man, this person is a rock solid or really dogmatic and passionate about this. And then you go look at their life and it doesn't like line up. And I think that's such a phony way to live. For me, it was exhausting to just say, guys, I can't keep up with everything, and I feel very misinformed on a lot of things, that I'm just going to do my best to try to live this out locally with the people I'm surrounded by. And I really don't care if 300 anonymous social media users who are somewhere around the world, country, like or care about, you know, things I'm posting. So I don't know. We're on a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but I do think at some point we've got to stop addressing things over social media.
Yeah.
It's not helping. It's not working. I've had some blunders the times I've tried to do it, you know, and it's just, there's probably going to be those times where you're like, oh, I probably need to say something here, but yeah, it's most of the times it's just not productive.
Yeah, those dialogues get toxic pretty quickly.
Yeah,
because there's almost always that person who will take it there. You know, your networks are wide enough. I mean, I've got probably 1,500 Facebook friends, so I'm very popular.
Come on. It's like, how many of them do you actually know?
Yeah, exactly. You know? But there's always that one person that if you say something that's a little, you know, on the edge, they're going to be like, well, let me correct you. Let me get you back in place. And so sometimes it's just like, well, if you want to have that conversation, why don't you have it with people that you're in proximity with?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that brings up the question. This is actually something that happened last week. The Northview Network, that's something that we are really investing heavily in here at the church. And that's really just a place where churches can come together to make each other better, to build each other up. And talking about your social network, you brought in some friends. Who are some of the guys that you are listening to right now? Some of the guys that have really spoken life into you in the last couple of years?
Yeah. Well, in terms of sermons, I do get that a lot. People ask me which pastors I like to listen to around the country. I actually don't ever really listen to sermons.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there's not great preachers out there. Part of it, honestly, is the way my mind works. I do think I have a bit of a photographic memory. And I think there are such good preachers out there that there's no question, bro, if I start listening to other people's sermons, that's going to get lodged in my head in a way that I can't explain, but in a way that I could listen to someone's message and almost preach it.
Yeah.
Like 80% the same if I wanted to. And so I think there's part of that, trying to maintain that discipline of, God, what are you saying to me? And not just cherry picking other people's messages. So I don't listen to a lot of sermons. If anything, I read sermons. I just like some of the old school guys, Charles Spurgeon being a big, favorite of mine, Martin Lloyd-Jones, who did years on the book of Romans. I've read a lot of his commentaries during the study that we've been on. So those ones, I would say, as of late, people like a Timothy Keller had a pretty significant, influence on just the way I view the gospel. And I just thought he was solid, and he was standing for very conservative, orthodox Christian views in New York City.
Yeah.
Pastoring in Manhattan, dealing with a lot of skeptics, and so he has a lot of books that contend for the faith in I think a very productive way. And then I don't know. I think I just have been blessed with great friends over the years. My therapist, HUD, is just a significant figure in
love
my
HUD.
life.
HUD's great.
Yeah. He's definitely, so obviously for years he was my therapist. And then at some point, I think there reaches maybe a point in the relationship where I don't know. How does that relationship work in terms of a therapist and a mentor? Yeah. I'd say at this point he's still gives me the therapeutic clinical assessments and advice, but he is much more than that, and probably I would say in my personal experience, one of the sharpest, biggest brains I've been around, and definitely humbles me every time I talk to him. But he's, I just can't state enough how significant the role he plays in my life. And then I got to travel through Succession. I got invited to be a part of a cohort of like 7 or 8 guys who were all, for whatever reason, stepping into Succession around the same time I was, and taking over really great ministries, following living legends. All of us actually followed predecessors who are still alive and in the community and adding value to the church. And how do you function and find yourself in the shadow of someone who is just so remarkable? And then how do you grow into a role that for most of us, like, even if you're coming out of a church of a few thousand, stepping into a church of tens of thousands is a daunting thing, and it requires some leadership growth. And so that group for me was, and still is, and those are a lot of the guys sometimes I bring in to speak to the network. It's good to be able to hang out with them again, and they've been a significant value add. And then there's just people who've been with me the whole journey. Yeah, I've got guys like Tracy Payno and Paul Herkman and Nate Roosh. These are guys who were faculty members at the university that I attended, who are still people who I look up to and get to intermittently throughout the calendar year connect with and hear from, and love those guys. buddies I went through master's programs with. I got a buddy, Steve Husky in Alabama, who is one of my favorite pastors. I just think what he's done with his church there in terms of taking over a church that went through a double moral failure and was really small and in a really tough position. And I mean, that church is like 3,000-4,000 people, multiple locations. He's done a bang up job. So yeah, I don't know. I think I've been spoiled in that regards.
That's good. For those that don't know, can you talk about the Northview Network and what the network is doing? Because a lot of people in our church kind of hear a little bit about it, but the Northview Network is actually really expanding and taking some ground.
Yeah, in ways that we didn't see. Selfishly, I think initially my thought was I need to figure out a way to strategically build relationships with other pastors. And if I can have a relationship with the senior pastor, that will only trickle down, to where my staff and our congregation have a continuity and appreciation for their ministries as well. What I don't think I was expecting, but what has certainly become the case, is post-pandemic, there just is a growing need among ministers to be in genuine relationship, not attending conferences where you get a bunch of hype and inspiration, but no, truly walking, through life and ministry alongside other brothers and sisters in the faith. And that, I think, has probably been one of the driving factors of just pastors looking for genuine community. And that's really what takes place a lot through the network. We try to create really small rooms on niche conversations, and so we consider the whole spectrum of ministry, whether that's children's ministry or pastoral care or administration or finances or HR or worship, and you can just run down the list. And then we create conversations around those things. We invite leaders, some national, some local. One of my favorite things is we always leverage other local voices, not just Northview voices, get to speak into that, which I think is great. And we just kind of have those niche conversations. And so it's really grown, and it's been really encouraging. We're always best, I think, when we're under pressure or facing something. I just think, like in my lifetime, if you were to ask me, when was the time you were proudest of our country? I'd say the days that followed 9/11.
Yeah.
I just, when I look back on the nation's response collectively post 9/11 in that window, so many distractions were set aside and unnecessary disagreements and divisions were set aside, and there was a rally point. I think we're better under pressure, and the church is under pressure. I don't ever really know how aware the average Christian or churchgoer is of those things. We're going on over a decade in America of closing 10,000 churches a year.
Yeah.
And the challenges, the reason why pastors are continuing to walk away from the ministry, the number one reason, you look at all the surveys and data, is just that the ministry space is becoming too hostile. And to stand publicly, preach the gospel, make decisions on behalf of a congregation to strategically advance gospel initiatives and the cause of Christ within communities, it's just going to come with resistance. And so I think pastors are beat up. And I think a lot of the network is finding life with pastors recognizing, hey, I need to have some battle buddies, and I need to find a place where I can be reminded that I'm in this foxhole with some other really great people. And I'm really thankful for what's happening through the network. It's amazing.
Yeah. As we look at kind of just, the Big C Church, we call it, we are a little C Church as Northview Church.
Very little. Very little. I think that's important for everyone to understand. You can sometimes think mega church, multi-site church. It's the reason why I think people appreciate the mountains and the ocean.
Yeah.
They give you the gift of smallness.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, how do you put a large church in front of the mountain of what the
Right.
capital C church is. This is a big, universal, global movement with multiple expressions around the world, and we're just a small part of it.
Yeah. And you look at like all these churches, you look at the churches that are closing and things like that, and you look at the number of people that are in full-time ministry. And I don't know what those numbers are across the United States, but compared to the population of the United States, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
What can people in our church, and I'm assuming like most of the people listening to this podcast are in our church, but there's probably some people outside. What can people in the church do to help push the ministry of the church forward? And what are the best ways for just a Christian to like lean into their community better?
Yeah. Well, I do think, one, being a consistent contributor to whatever church you're a part of. The Christian who thinks that they can just survive off a podcast and they attend online and they're not truly integrated into a fellowship is completely missing it. And you might for the season be getting by, but there will come a season in your life where you are going to need the church. And I think one of the things that helps the church move forward is recognizing that there will be times that others need you and there will be times that you need others. And just choosing to be rooted and committed and play your part despite the season is something. And when you look at the average churchgoer only going to church 1.5 times a month, is the recent data. That in itself, Hebrews says, don't neglect the gathering of the saints. Yeah. And that is something that's happening in real time. In addition to that, I would say, I don't know if we're losing our emphasis. I look at my own teaching and I think, maybe this is something I need to do a better job of. And that is placing before the congregation the call to full-time ministry, that God is still in the business of tapping people on the shoulder and saying, hey, I have set each and every individual apart for a very specific purpose, and one is not better than the other. However, attention does need to be given, not just to the person who's called to the marketplace, but to the person who's called to give their life to the local church. And I was blessed to be in a space where that conversation took place and the Holy Spirit really triggered something in me. But I do think individuals praying about what are the chances that the Lord might be asking you to step out of the industry or the career that you've been in, or what are the chances God is asking you to change your degree and pursue different studies that would ready you for a career in the ministry. So, one, I would say pray about the calling. Two, no one ever really wants to talk about, which is kind of weird and something that I think probably says more about the person scoffing than anything else. But the church has always required necessary resources to move it forward. And whether it is continuing to advance global missions, whether it is continuing to advance local outreach initiatives. We talk about like the food pantries and the homeless shelters and, all the different things we do for single moms and addicts. And you can go on down the list, our efforts within our local prisons. Well, those things all take resources. And then you look at the discipleship initiatives, whether that's all the different programs offered for our children or all the different programs offered for youth and teenagers. You can run it up the list and realize that there will always be a need for gathering places and facilities. And I think a stingy generation will only hamstring the next. And I would just say pray about your financial participation in the cause of Christ. And I always think it's best, I'm assuming that people listening to this are not just people who go to Northview, but you owe it to yourself to find a church where you are confident in the leadership. Yeah. You are excited about the mission and vision, and you are pleased. We just read a passage this last week in Romans chapter 15 where Paul said the Macedonians and the Achaean people were pleased to give an offering.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
find yourself in a place where there's a joy in your heart to take that next step when it comes to your resources, because there's so much to your spiritual journey that hinges on generous living. And if you're saying the church you're a part of isn't a place where you can live that out, well, you're not helping the church by staying.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing if you were to sit down with that pastor, at least I would hope they would say, hey, you might as well find a place. And why it's not here, who knows? But get in a place where you can take next steps with Christ. I think a lot of times that conversation, if anything, exposes maybe a deeper issue as to why the person doesn't want to participate. But I do think that's one. I think prayer, Jesus himself was very adamant that my house ought to be a house of prayer. And it is without a doubt the most powerful thing we have available to us. The fact that we can access our Heavenly Father and we can make petitions and pray in agreement and leverage the power that comes through that in terms of interceding and asking for God's guidance on our ministries. And so I think Christians praying for their church, praying for the congregation they're a part of, praying for the leadership they're being led by is huge. Serving, all the things that are just super basic that in this generation, I just think there is a massive need to revisit the fundamentals that have always shouldered the uniqueness of the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we kind of draw to a close today, I want to kind of go back to the beginning a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want you to complete a statement for me.
Okay.
So, because he lives, what?
Well, I know the lyric finishes. I can face tomorrow.
Yeah.
I just, the idea of eternity is such a wrecking ball. I think we know our days this side of the grave are numbered. It's really hard to get our minds around the fact that we're going to live forever in eternal harmony with our Maker.
Yeah.
And I think what we do in the here and now is going to have some carryover into the next. I don't think that is something that we need to fear. It's just something that, if anything, should motivate us of, I'm going to spend eternity with the saints, with my Heavenly Father, discussing what I did in the small window that I was entrusted with. Scripture says life is but a vapor. And it's like, hey, because he lives, because he has established life beyond the grave and eternity post the grave is going to be so much longer than the lives we live here and now. And when I reach that point, I want to be proud of how I stewarded this one, and because he lives, I want to be ready for eternity, proud of the life that I lived. And so I don't know. I think it should come with more courage. That's probably the thing that in this season really shows up on my radar is how timid Christians are, how self-conscious, how delicate Christians are. And I just think because he lives, we should be a little bit more courageous, in terms of just stepping out, living a life for Christ. And so, yeah, we can face tomorrow. All fear is gone. That's a big statement. That's sometimes for most people a aspirational statement, not an actual statement. It's like, hey, not all fear is gone, but I'm living into that awareness. But that's the jam.
Man. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed the conversation today, and we really just want to encourage you to kind of live this week in light of because he lives.
Come on.